The diplomatic chamber aboard the Vaxian command ship hummed with tension. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the crystalline conference table, their various forms of anxiety manifesting in clicks, hisses, and nervous antenna twitches. At the far end, looking remarkably small compared to her alien counterparts, sat Commander Sarah Chen of Earth's Expeditionary Forces. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the disaster unfolding on Colony 7. The mining settlement, perched on a rocky outcrop surrounded by acidic swamps, was cut off. A massive seismic event had destroyed the main landing platform, and toxic fumes were rising from newly opened fissures in the ground. 300 colonists representing 8 different species had maybe 6 hours before the atmosphere became completely unbreathable, even with their emergency filters. "The situation is critical," announced Admiral Throck, the Vaxian military commander. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concern. "Our transport ships cannot land without a proper platform. The alternative sites are too unstable. We estimate 47% casualties if we attempt an emergency evacuation with standard protocols." The Xinthian trade minister's translator crackled. "What about the atmospheric shuttles? Surely they can hover long enough for colonists to board?" Throck's mandibles clicked negatively. "The toxic fumes interfere with our stabilization systems. Any ship hovering for more than 30 seconds will experience cascade failures. We would lose both the ship and everyone aboard." Around the table, the representatives exchanged worried glances. Sarah had been quietly studying the holographic data, her fingers moving across her personal tablet. The human delegation had been invited to these coalition meetings only recently, after Earth had proven itself in a minor border skirmish. Most of the elder species still viewed humanity as the newcomers, the primitives who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel a mere 50 years ago. "There is one option," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the anxious chatter. The room fell silent. Several aliens turned their sensory organs toward her, some with what might have been curiosity, others with poorly concealed condescension. "The human speaks," muttered one of the Krell observers, a comment that wasn't quite as quiet as intended. His translation didn't hide the amusement in his tone. Sarah ignored the comment and stood, manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. The image zoomed in on a section of Colony 7's eastern perimeter. "There, that's a rooftop. The administrative building. It's reinforced concrete and titanium composite, built to withstand the seismic activity common to the region." Admiral Throck's eyes swiveled to study the location. "Commander Chen, that space is barely 60 meters square. It has communication towers, ventilation systems, and various obstacles. No standard coalition vessel could land there safely." "I wasn't thinking of a standard coalition vessel," Sarah replied calmly. She pulled up a schematic that made several aliens lean forward in confusion. The design looked absurdly primitive compared to their sleek gravitic craft. "This is a UH-60 Blackhawk," she explained, "a rotary wing aircraft from Earth. We have 3 of them in our cargo bay, brought along for planetary survey work in atmospheres too dense for standard shuttles." The Xinthian minister's translator sputtered, with what sounded like laughter. "You propose to rescue 300 beings with primitive helicopters? Machines that use rotating blades to achieve lift. Commander, surely you jest. Each Blackhawk can carry 11 passengers in addition to crew," Sarah continued, undeterred. "With 3 birds, we can extract 30 colonists per run. 10 runs total, maybe 11 to be safe. The helicopters are designed for hostile environments and can handle the atmospheric composition. The rotor wash will actually help disperse the toxic fumes temporarily." Admiral Throck studied the human carefully. Even if these machines could function in such conditions, the precision required to land on that rooftop, surrounded by obstacles, with failing visibility and rising toxic clouds. "Commander, our best pilots with our most advanced systems could not guarantee such a landing. You would need someone with extraordinary skill and perhaps extraordinary foolishness." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I can fly it." The reaction was immediate. The Krell observer actually laughed, a barking sound that his translator rendered as harsh mockery. "The human thinks she can perform precision flight operations that our best pilots cannot." "This is absurd." Others were more diplomatic but equally skeptical. The Vaxian tactical officer spoke carefully. "Commander Chen, no disrespect to your species' capabilities, but our pilots train for decades in simulation and practice. They have neural enhancement interfaces that provide millisecond reaction times. I have 5,000 flight hours, Sarah interrupted quietly. 3,000 of those in combat zones. I learned to fly helicopters when I was 19 years old. I've put birds down on oil rigs during hurricanes, on mountain peaks with zero visibility, and on moving ships in the middle of storms. Your pilots might be good, but they're trained on machines that do half the work for them. A Black Hawk? That machine does exactly what you tell it to do. Nothing more, nothing less. If you can't fly it, you crash. There's no safety net. The room had gone very quiet. Admiral Throck's sensory tendrils quivered, reading the chemical signatures in the air. Whatever he detected in Sarah's scent made his posture shift slightly. You are serious, he said slowly. 300 lives are on the line, Sarah replied. My crew and I can have the first Black Hawk prepped and launched in 40 minutes. The flight to Colony 7 will take another 30. That gives us 4.5 hours for extraction operations before the atmosphere becomes lethal. Tight but doable. The Zynthian minister's translator was more respectful now. And if you fail? If this, Black Hawk, crashes on that rooftop? Sarah's expression didn't change. Then you'll have lost 3 humans and 1 helicopter. And you'll still have 300 colonists who need saving. But I won't fail. The Krell observer leaned forward. Your confidence is either admirable or delusional, human. Perhaps both. Perhaps, Sarah acknowledged. But confidence isn't the question. Capability is. And I'm telling you, I can do this. Admiral Throck looked around the table at the assembled representatives. His decision-making tendrils flexed in a pattern that Sarah's cultural training recognized as resignation, mixed with desperate hope. Very well, Commander Chen. You have authorization to proceed. I will assign 2 of our medical ships to follow your helicopters for immediate triage once colonists are extracted. But understand, if this fails, it won't, Sarah said simply. She was already moving toward the door, her stride confident and purposeful. My team will be ready in 30 minutes. I suggest your medical crews prepare for incoming wounded. Some of those colonists have been exposed to the fumes already. As the door sealed behind the human, the Krell observer shook his head. She will die on that rooftop, and we will be scrambling to attempt a rescue with inadequate time remaining. Admiral Throck's tendrils curled thoughtfully. Perhaps we are about to learn why these humans survived on a death world long enough to reach the stars. There was something in her scent. No fear. None at all. The chamber fell into uneasy silence, broken only by the soft hum of the holographic display showing Colony 7's slowly deteriorating situation. The human cargo bay was organized chaos when Sarah arrived. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, already had 2 mechanics pulling protective covers off the first Black Hawk. The distinctive shape of the helicopter looked decidedly ancient compared to the sleek alien craft visible through the bay's atmospheric shield, but Sarah felt a surge of confidence seeing it. She knew this machine. She understood every rivet, every system, every quirk. Chief, status report, she called out, moving to the pre-flight checklist station. Rodriguez jogged over, his weathered face showing no surprise at the emergency deployment. After 20 years in the service, he'd learned to expect the unexpected. Bird 1 is ready for final pre-flight. I've got teams prepping 2 and 3 now. Colonel Takahashi and Lieutenant Morrison are suiting up. They caught the alert and volunteered before you even sent the call. Sarah nodded. Having her 2 most experienced pilots for the other Blackhawks was a stroke of luck. Load standard rescue configuration. Strip out anything we don't need. I want maximum passenger capacity and fuel efficiency. And get me atmospheric data for Colony 7. Everything, wind speeds, thermal currents, toxicity levels, the works. Already downloading from the Vaxians, Rodriguez confirmed, though they keep asking if we're sure about this. One of their techs actually asked if our helicopters were some kind of joke. Wanted to know where we hid the real propulsion system. Sarah allowed herself a brief smile. What did you tell them? Told them the spinning blades were the real propulsion system. I think his translator broke. He made this choking sound and walked away. The smile faded as Sarah pulled up the atmospheric data on her tablet. The situation at Colony 7 was worse than she'd thought. Wind gusts up to 40 knots, thermal turbulence from the heated toxic gases, and visibility dropping rapidly. On paper, these were conditions where helicopter operations should be suspended. On paper, a lot of things about humanity shouldn't work. Colonel Takahashi approached, already in her flight suit, helmet under one arm. The Japanese pilot's expression was calm, but Sarah could see the focus in her eyes. I reviewed the mission parameters. That rooftop is going to be interesting. That's one word for it, Sarah replied. Yuki, I won't sugarcoat this. The approach is going to be tight. Those communication towers create a wind tunnel effect, and we'll be operating in brownout conditions from all the debris in the air. So, a typical Tuesday, Takahashi said dryly. Remember Syria? We put down in that soccer stadium with enemy fire, dust storm, and a broken-tail rotor warning light that wouldn't stop screaming at us. That light was actually correct, though. We did have a cracked rotor. Yes, but we still completed the mission. Takahashi checked her watch. Morrison's doing final checks on Bird 3. I'll take Bird 2. Standard rescue protocol? Sarah pulled up the tactical display. First wave, I'll take the most critical casualties. Medical scanners show we've got about 40 colonists with serious toxic exposure. The Vaxian medships will be standing by, but they can't get close to the rooftop. We extract, get clear of the toxic zone, and transfer patients to their ships. You and Morrison stagger your approaches behind me. I'll mark the landing zone with our standard signals. Lieutenant Morrison joined them, his lanky frame already suited up. The youngest of the three pilots, he still had what Rodriguez called that hungry look, the eagerness of someone who lived to fly. Ma'am, I've been running the math. Even with perfect conditions, we're looking at 40 minutes of flight time per round trip. That's cutting it close with the timeline. Which is why we're not going to have perfect conditions, Sarah said. We're going to push the birds harder than recommended. We'll run hot, we'll load heavy, and we'll skip some of the standard safety margins. These helicopters were built to take abuse. We're going to prove that to our alien friends. An alarm chimed on Sarah's tablet. The Vaxian tactical channel was requesting a connection. She accepted, and Admiral Throck's face appeared on the screen. His multiple eyes blinking in that pattern she was learning to read as concern. Commander Chen, we have positioned 3 medical vessels at the rendezvous coordinates you specified. However, I must inform you that our atmospheric probes show conditions at Colony 7 have deteriorated faster than predicted. Wind speeds are now sustained at 45 knots with gusts measured at 60. Our meteorological team recommends suspending all flight operations. Sarah glanced at the raw data streaming across her screen. The Admiral wasn't exaggerating. These were borderline hurricane force winds. In training, they would have grounded all aircraft without question. But training scenarios never included 300 people about to die. Noted, Admiral. We're launching in 15 minutes. Throck's tendrils quivered. Commander, our own military refuses to fly in these conditions. Perhaps we should reconsider. There may be another solution. There isn't, Sarah said flatly. And respectfully, Admiral, your military doesn't fly helicopters. They fly computers with wings. We fly machines that require constant input, constant adjustment, constant attention. Those conditions you're measuring, they just mean we'll have to work harder. But that's what we do. The confidence of your species continues to astound me, Throck said slowly. Or possibly alarm me. I have not yet decided which. You'll know in about 90 minutes, Sarah replied. Chen out. She disconnected and turned to find Rodriguez standing beside Bird 1, his team having completed their work. The crew chief's expression was the careful neutrality of someone who had sent pilots into danger too many times to count. She's ready, Commander. Everything checks out. Full fuel, medical supplies loaded, passenger space maximized. I also took the liberty of installing the external rescue hoist, just in case you need to extract someone from a tight spot. Sarah clasped his shoulder briefly. Good thinking, Chief. If we're not back in 4 hours, you'll be back, Rodriguez interrupted. You always are. Just try not to bring my birds back too beaten up. I hate filling out damage reports. Sarah climbed into the pilot's seat, the familiar surroundings settling over her like a second skin. Her hands moved through the startup sequence automatically, each switch and button an old friend. The turbine began its characteristic whine, building to the distinctive sound that had been putting helicopters into the sky for over a century. Through the cockpit window, she could see alien technicians and observers gathering at the bay's observation deck. Some had brought recording equipment. Others were consulting with each other, their body language suggesting anything from curiosity to outright disbelief. The Krell observer from the meeting was there, his posture radiating smug certainty that he was about to witness a spectacular failure. Let them watch, Sarah thought as the rotors began to turn, slowly at first, then building speed. Let them see what humans could do with machines they considered primitive. Let them understand that sometimes the oldest solutions were the best solutions, and that no amount of technology could replace skill, determination, and the willingness to fly into hell to bring people home. The rotor wash began kicking up dust in the cargo bay. Rodriguez gave her the thumbs up, his team already moving to prep the second bird. Behind her in the cabin, her crew chief for this flight, Sergeant Mallory, secured the medical supplies and checked the safety restraints one final time. All secure, Commander. Ready when you are. Sarah increased power, feeling the Black Hawk respond to her touch like it was reading her mind. This was the moment before the calm before commitment. Once she lifted off, there was no turning back. 300 lives depended on what happened in the next few hours. Tower, this is Rescue 1 requesting clearance for departure, she said into the comm. The Vaxian flight controller's voice crackled back, still tinged with disbelief. Rescue 1, you are cleared for departure. May your flight be successful. Sarah pulled collective added pedal and eased the cyclic forward. The Black Hawk lifted smoothly off the deck, nose dipping slightly as it transitioned to forward flight. Through the atmospheric shield, the hostile environment of Colony 7's planet waited. Toxic and violent. Rescue 2 and 3. Follow my lead. Let's go save some lives. The flight to Colony 7 took 32 minutes of hard flying through increasingly hostile atmosphere. Sarah kept the Black Hawk low, using what little terrain existed to break up the worst of the wind patterns. Behind her, Takahashi and Morrison maintained formation, their helicopters rising and falling in the turbulence like ships on a stormy sea. The toxic clouds appeared on the horizon as a sickly yellow-green wall, spreading from the seismic fissures like a living thing. Sarah's instruments showed atmospheric composition readings that would have killed an unprotected human in under 2 minutes. The colonists' emergency filters were buying them time, but not much. Rescue 1, this is Colony 7 Emergency Coordinator. A strained voice crackled over the comm. The translator identified the speaker as Vren, a Kaltorian administrator. We have 37 colonists in critical condition. Requesting you take them first. Confirmed, Colony 7. What's the situation on that rooftop? Stable for now, but visibility is down to 20 meters and dropping. We've tried to mark the safe landing area with chemical lights, but the wind keeps blowing them over. The communication towers are creating significant downdrafts. Sarah studied her forward display as Colony 7 came into view. The settlement clung to its rocky outcrop like a barnacle, surrounded by the roiling toxic swamp. She could see the target rooftop, a small gray rectangle festooned with equipment that turned what should have been a straightforward landing into an obstacle course. Copy that. Colony 7, beginning approach now. She keyed the intership channel. Rescue 2-3, hold at Rally Point Alpha. Let me check out this landing zone before you commit. Takahashi's voice came back calm and professional. Roger, Rescue 1, we have you in sight. Sarah began her approach, reducing speed and altitude. The wind hit them like a physical blow, trying to shove the Black Hawk sideways. She corrected instinctively, her hands and feet making constant tiny adjustments to keep the helicopter stable. The rotor wash from the spinning blades created a brownout of dust and small debris, limiting visibility even further. Through the murk, she could see the rooftop's obstacles more clearly now. 2 communication towers, one on each side of the space. A cluster of ventilation units in the northwest corner. Several satellite dishes that swiveled randomly in the gusting wind, and in the middle, maybe 40 meters of clear space that looked even smaller when viewed from above. Sergeant Mallory, what's your assessment? Sarah asked her crew chief. Mallory leaned forward, studying the landing zone through the side window. It's tight, Commander. Real tight. Those towers are going to create weird wind patterns. And if we drift more than 2 meters in any direction, we're going to clip something. Acknowledged. Sarah began a slow circle around the rooftop, reading the wind, feeling how it pushed and pulled at the helicopter. Every aircraft had its personality, its quirks. This particular Black Hawk liked to weather vane slightly in crosswinds, and it had a tendency to settle faster than expected in ground effect. She'd need to account for both. The Vaxian tactical channel chimed. Admiral Throck's voice carried barely suppressed anxiety. Commander Chen, our sensors indicate you are approaching the landing zone. Please be advised that wind speeds in that specific location are measuring 62 knots sustained. This is beyond safe operational parameters for any aircraft we possess. Admiral, I appreciate the concern, but I need to focus. Rescue 1 out. She silenced the channel and concentrated entirely on the approach. The rooftop was coming up fast now. She could see colonists crowded in the stairwell access, their faces pressed against the windows. Vaxian, Kaltorian, Xinthian, even a few humans from the mining crew, all of them desperate, all of them hoping that this primitive human machine could do what their advanced technology could not. Mallory, give me distance calls, Sarah ordered. 50 meters, 45, 40, you're drifting left. Commander, 35, good correction, 30, 25, watch that tower on the right. Wind's pushing us toward it. Sarah made a slight pedal adjustment, feeling the tail rotor bite into the wind. The Black Hawk steadied. Through the dust and debris, she could see the marked landing zone, a pitiful small square that suddenly looked impossibly tiny. 20 meters, 15, 10, looking good. Commander. The helicopter descended into the rooftop's wind tunnel. The gusts hit them from 3 directions at once, trying to spin the aircraft. Sarah's world narrowed to pure instinct and reaction. Cyclic right to counter the push, collective up slightly to arrest the descent. Left pedal to keep the nose straight. Every muscle memory from 5,000 flight hours compressed into seconds of perfect control. 5 meters. Easy now, 3 meters, 2, 1. The wheels touched down with barely a bump. Sarah immediately reduced power, keeping enough rotor speed to maintain control, but not so much that the wash would blow equipment off the roof. She'd done it. The Black Hawk sat perfectly centered in the landing zone, rotors still turning, steady as a rock despite the wind howling around them. Rescue 1 is down and secure, she reported, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from her voice. Rescue 2-3, the zone is viable. Wind is strongest from the northwest. Watch the tower on the right side, it creates a downdraft. Approach from the south and keep your speed up until the last moment. Roger that, Rescue 1, Takahashi responded. Standing by. Mallory was already out of his seat, sliding the cabin door open. The first group of colonists emerged from the stairwell, the critical casualties supported by others or on makeshift stretchers. Sarah kept her hands on the controls, ready to make adjustments if the wind shifted. The loading process was faster than expected. The colonists, despite their various physiologies, moved with desperate efficiency. A Kaltorian with burned respiratory membranes, a Vaxian whose carapace showed cracks from toxic exposure, 3 humans, their skin showing the distinctive yellow tinge of chemical poisoning, an elderly Xinthian who could barely stand. That's 11, Commander, Mallory called out. We're loaded. Secure them and get strapped in. We're lifting off. Sarah increased collective smoothly, and the Black Hawk rose from the rooftop like it was mounted on rails. She transitioned to forward flight, banking away from the toxic cloud bank and heading for the rendezvous point where the Vaxian medical ships waited. Rescue 2, the landing zone is yours. Good luck. Takahashi's response was characteristically brief. Copy, beginning approach. The transfer to the medical ships took only 3 minutes. The Vaxian doctors worked with impressive speed, using their gravitic stretchers to move the critical patients from the Black Hawk's cabin. Sarah watched through her window as one of the human miners, a young woman maybe 25 years old, was carried away. The woman's eyes found Sarah's and she mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Sarah nodded once, then focused back on her instruments. Emotional responses would come later. Right now there were still 260-something colonists who needed extraction. Rescue 1 returning to Colony 7. She transmitted. Round 2. The return flight took less time because she knew the patterns now, understood how the wind moved around the settlement's buildings. She could see Takahashi's Black Hawk lifting off from the rooftop, another load of colonists safely aboard. Morrison was already on approach for his first landing. Over the next 2 hours, the 3 helicopters fell into a rhythm. Land, load, lift-off, transfer, return. Again and again. The pilots said little, their focus absolute. Each landing was a masterpiece of precision flying, each takeoff a calculated risk. The wind never let up and the toxic clouds kept rising, eating away at their safety margins. On Sarah's 4th run, disaster nearly struck. As she settled onto the rooftop, a particularly violent gust caught the tail, spinning the Black Hawk 30 degrees. Her left wheel came within inches of the communication tower, but her hands had already moved, correcting before conscious thought could catch up. The helicopter straightened, settled, and held position. Nice save, Commander, Mallory said quietly. Sarah didn't reply. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. Just another day at the office, she told herself. Just another impossible landing in impossible conditions. By the time she lifted off with her 5th load, she'd stopped thinking about the danger. The Black Hawk had become an extension of her will, responsive and reliable. Each control input produced exactly the response she intended. This was what she'd trained for, lived for. This was flying at its purest form, stripped of all the safety nets and automation. Just human skill against hostile nature. The Vaxian tactical channel, which she'd unmuted, had gone silent except for occasional position updates from the medical ships. Sarah suspected that Admiral Throck and his team were watching in stunned silence, as the primitive human machines completed mission after mission, landing after landing. Without fail, let them watch, she thought again. Let them learn. The 8th run brought complications. Sarah was on final approach to the rooftop when Vren's voice crackled urgently over the comm. Rescue 1, we have a situation. The stairwell access door is jammed. There are 15 colonists trapped inside and toxic fumes are seeping into the building. The door mechanism was damaged by the seismic activity. Sarah held position in a hover just above the rooftop, the Black Hawk rocking in the wind. Through the cockpit window, she could see several colonists frantically working at the door, but it wasn't moving. Her mind raced through options. Mallory, we've got the external hoist installed, right? The crew chief's eyes widened slightly as he understood what she was planning. Yes, Commander, but in these winds, a hoist operation is going to be dangerous. We'll be fighting the wind the entire time, and if we drift into those towers, I know the risks. Get the hoist ready, and break out the cutting equipment from the emergency kit. We might need to cut through that door. Sarah adjusted her position, moving the helicopter to a stable hover directly over the jammed doorway. Every instinct screamed that this was insane. Hovering in 60-knot winds next to tall obstacles while trying to lower a crew member on a cable went against every safety protocol ever written. But the alternative was leaving 15 people to die. Rescue 2-3, this is Rescue 1. I'm going to be occupied for a few minutes. Continue your extraction operations. Takahashi's voice came back immediately. Rescue 1, do you need assistance? Negative. Just keep those colonists moving. We're running out of time. Through her instrument, Sarah could see the atmospheric toxicity levels creeping higher. Another hour, maybe less, and even the emergency filters wouldn't be enough. She watched Mallory clip himself to the hoist cable and give her a thumbs up. The crew chief's face was set in determined lines. All business. Lowering now, Mallory reported. Sarah's entire world became the delicate dance of keeping the helicopter absolutely stable. The wind tried to push them sideways. She corrected with the cyclic. The gusts tried to spin them. She countered with the pedals. The downdraft from the rotors tried to force them down. She adjusted the collective. Every second required dozens of tiny inputs, her hands and feet working in perfect coordination. Below, Mallory reached the rooftop and unclipped from the hoist. Through her side mirror, Sarah could see him pulling out the cutting torch, its bright flame visible even through the murk. The colonists trapped inside were pressing against the door's window, their faces showing various species expressions of desperate hope. Commander, I've got movement on the toxicity readings, her co-pilot seat occupant, a young lieutenant named Park who'd volunteered for this mission, warned. The fumes are rising faster than predicted. We've got maybe 45 minutes before this whole area becomes completely lethal. Acknowledged. Sarah's voice was calm, but her mind was calculating. 45 minutes. 3 more full extraction runs needed, plus whatever time it took to get through this door. They were going to be cutting it very close. Mallory worked the cutting torch methodically, creating a line of molten metal around the door's locking mechanism. The wind kept trying to extinguish the flame, but he persisted, his body bent against the gusts. Finally, with a shriek of tortured metal audible even over the helicopter's roar, the door burst open. Colonists poured out, coughing and stumbling. Several had to be supported by others, their exposure to the fumes worse than those who'd been waiting outside. Mallory guided them toward the helicopter, counting heads. 15 souls accounted for, he reported, climbing back onto the hoist cable, ready for pickup. Sarah lifted the helicopter slightly, watching as Mallory swung in the wind below. The gusts caught him, slamming him toward one of the communication towers. He pulled himself tight against the cable, missing the tower by maybe a meter. Sarah's hands moved instinctively, correcting their position, and brought him safely to the cabin door where willing hands pulled him inside. All secure, Mallory gasped. Let's get out of here. This load was heavier than the others. 15 colonists packed into a space meant for 11 made the Black Hawk sluggish on the controls. Sarah added power, and the helicopter lifted reluctantly, nose high, struggling against the weight and the wind. Come on, girl, she murmured to the machine. I know you've got it in you, the Black Hawk responded, climbing steadily despite the adverse conditions. Sarah could feel the strain on the engines, hear the slight change in the turbine pitch that meant they were working at maximum capacity, but the machine held together, proving once again that sometimes older technology built with a safety margin for abuse was more reliable than efficient modern designs. The transfer to the medical ships was faster this time. The Vaxian doctors had developed a system, moving quickly to clear the cabin for the next load. One of them, a physician Sarah recognized from earlier runs, paused to look up at her cockpit window. His translator converted his words. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. By the 10th run, exhaustion was setting in. Sarah's arms ached from the constant control inputs and her eyes burned from staring through the dust and chemical haze. But the mental arithmetic was clear. They were going to make it. One more run after this one, and every colonist would be safe. Morrison's helicopter had developed a warning light on the 8th run, some minor hydraulic issue that the crew chief said was probably a faulty sensor. Morrison had continued flying anyway, because that's what the mission required. Takahashi's Black Hawk had taken a beating from the wind, and Sarah had seen her fighting to control a vibration that suggested something in the rotor system wasn't quite right anymore. But all three helicopters were still flying, still completing their missions. Rescue 1, this is Admiral Throck. The Vaxian commander's voice carried a tone Sarah hadn't heard before. Was it respect? Commander Chen, our sensors indicate the toxic fumes have reached critical density. You must expedite your final extractions. Working on it, Admiral, Sarah replied, guiding the Black Hawk down toward the rooftop for the 10th time. The landing zone looked different now, covered in debris and scorch marks from the chemical interactions. But it was still viable, still just big enough. The landing was instinctive at this point. Sarah didn't think about the controls anymore. She simply willed the helicopter to go where she wanted, and it obeyed. Wheels touched down, colonists loaded, wheels lifted off. The rhythm had become automatic, but on the final approach, Park suddenly spoke urgently. Commander, we've got a problem. Colony 7 reports one more colonist, a Xinthian child still inside the administrative building. She got separated from her family group during the evacuation. They found her hiding in a supply closet on the 3rd floor. Sarah's jaw tightened. The building was already filling with toxic fumes. The windows on the lower floor showed the sickly yellow-green haze seeping through every crack. Going inside would be suicide without proper protective gear, and they didn't have time for that. Rescue 2-3. Can either of you reach the building with your external hoists? Negative, Rescue 1, Takahashi replied. We're both at minimum fuel state. We need to head to the medical ships now or we won't make it back. Morrison's voice added. Same here, Commander. We're running on fumes ourselves. Sarah looked at her own fuel gauge. She had maybe 15 minutes of flight time remaining. Enough to reach the medical ships with a small margin for error, but not enough to conduct a hoist rescue operation and still make it back. Rescue 2-3 proceed to medical transfer. Rescue 1 will handle the child. Commander, Takahashi began, concern clear in her voice. That's an order. Get your passengers to safety. Rescue 1 out. Sarah brought the Black Hawk into a stable hover next to the 3rd floor window of the administrative building. Through the glass, she could see the small Xinthian child, her pale blue skin already showing signs of toxic exposure. The girl was crying, her species equivalent of tears streaming down her face in luminescent drops. Mallory, prep the hoist, and get me a breather mask. I'm going in. Commander, you can't. The fumes inside that building will kill you in less than a minute even with a mask. Then I better work fast. Sarah engaged the autopilot hover function, a rarely used feature that would keep the helicopter relatively stable for short periods. It wasn't perfect, especially in these conditions, but it would have to do. You have the controls if something goes wrong. Park, you're with Mallory on the hoist. She unstrapped and moved to the cabin, pulling on the breather mask and checking its seal. The mask would filter out most of the toxins, but Mallory was right. She had maybe 60 seconds before the exposure became lethal. Probably less given how concentrated the fumes were inside that building. Mallory clipped her to the hoist cable, his face showing the internal struggle of a crew chief watching his commander do something insane. 30 seconds, Commander. In and out. Don't be a hero. Little late for that advice, Sarah said, then stepped out into the howling wind. The descent to the window was chaotic. The wind spun her on the cable, and she had to use her feet against the building's wall to steady herself. Through the window, the Xinthian child watched with wide eyes. Sarah gestured for her to move back, then used her boot to kick through the glass. The fumes hit her immediately, even through the mask. Sarah woke to the soft hum of alien medical equipment and the distinctive antiseptic smell that seemed universal across all species. Her throat still burned, but the sharp pain had dulled to a manageable ache. She blinked, her vision clearing to reveal a recovery room aboard one of the Vaxian medical ships. "Commander Chen, please remain still." A Vaxian physician approached, his scanner passing over her body. "You suffered moderate toxic exposure, damage to your respiratory membranes, and significant muscle strain. You should make a full recovery, but you must rest." "The child," Sarah croaked. "The Xinthian girl. Stable and recovering. You retrieved her just in time. Another 2 minutes of exposure and we would have lost her." The physician's tendrils curled, and what Sarah had learned was approval. "You took a significant risk entering that building." "Calculated risk," Sarah managed, then coughed. The physician immediately adjusted something on the medical console, and a cool sensation spread through her chest, easing the irritation. The door slid open, and Admiral Throck entered, his bulk filling the doorway. Behind him stood several other high-ranking coalition officials, including the Krell observer who had mocked her in the meeting. His expression now was considerably more subdued. "Commander Chen," Throck began, his translator rendering his tone as formal. "On behalf of the Coalition Council, I must extend our deepest gratitude. Your actions today saved 300 lives that our own technology and protocols deemed unsavable." Sarah tried to sit up, but the physician's firm appendage kept her in place. "My crew deserves equal credit, Admiral. Colonel Takahashi and Lieutenant Morrison flew flawlessly, and my crew chiefs kept those helicopters running under conditions that should have grounded them." "Your crew's commendations are already being processed," Throck assured her. "But we must acknowledge what you specifically accomplished. You landed a primitive rotary aircraft on a rooftop in hurricane-force winds, in toxic atmospheric conditions, surrounded by obstacles, 11 consecutive times without incident. Our tactical computers calculate the probability of success for such a mission at 0.03%. You succeeded 11 times. The Krell observer stepped forward, his posture showing something that might have been humility. "Commander Chen, I owe you an apology. When you stated you could fly that machine, I assumed it was either ignorance or arrogance speaking. I failed to understand that humanity's approach to aviation, while technologically primitive, develops a level of skill and instinct that our automated systems cannot replicate." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Your systems are excellent for what they do, observer, but they're designed to work within safe parameters. Humans learn to fly in machines that would kill us if we made mistakes. Every pilot earns their skill through risk. That creates a different kind of capability." "Indeed," the Krell acknowledged. "We have been reviewing the flight data from your helicopters. The number of control inputs you made during each landing sequence is extraordinary. Thousands of tiny adjustments per minute, each one compensating for wind, weight distribution, and environmental factors. And you did this instinctively without computer assistance." Another figure entered the room, a tall Kaltorian whom Sarah recognized as Coordinator Vren from Colony 7. Despite his species' typically reserved nature, he moved quickly to Sarah's bedside. "Commander Chen, I must thank you personally. My daughter was that child in the building. She had become separated during the evacuation, and I thought—" His translator captured the emotion crack in his voice. "You risked your life for her. There are no words sufficient to express my gratitude." Sarah felt her throat tighten, and not from the toxic exposure. "I'm just glad we got everyone out. How are the other colonists?" "All are expected to recover fully thanks to the rapid evacuation," Vren replied. "The medical teams report that another 30 minutes of exposure would have resulted in significant casualties. Your timing was, as you humans say, cutting it close. That's what we do best," Sarah said with a slight smile. Admiral Throck's tendrils made a complex gesture that Sarah's cultural database identified as profound respect, mixed with curiosity. "Commander, I must ask, when you were making that final rescue, your fuel was critically low. You knew there was a significant probability you would not reach our medical ships. Yet you proceeded anyway. Why?" Sarah considered the question carefully. How to explain the human perspective to species who had developed advanced technology before facing such stark choices? "Admiral, when I was learning to fly, my instructor told me something that stuck with me. He said that the machine will do exactly what you tell it to do. No more, no less. If you crash, it's because you made a mistake, not because the machine failed you. That philosophy extends to missions like this. That child needed rescue. I had the skills and equipment to attempt it. The risk was mine to take. But the mathematics of survival, the Krell observer began, are irrelevant when someone's life is at stake, Sarah interrupted gently. We don't calculate odds when we see someone in danger. We calculate solutions. Sometimes those solutions require accepting personal risk. That's not unique to humans, I'm sure, but it might be more central to how we operate. The room fell into thoughtful silence. Finally, Throck spoke again. Commander Chen, the Coalition Council has been discussing humanity's application for full membership in the Coalition. There has been resistance from some quarters who felt your species was too young, too primitive, too militaristic. After today's events, I will be recommending immediate acceptance of full membership status. Sarah felt a surge of emotion. Full Coalition membership meant access to advanced technology, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, everything humanity had been working toward since first contact. Admiral, I'm honored, but my actions today shouldn't be the sole basis. They are not, Throck assured her. But they are illustrative of what humanity brings to the Coalition. You possess capabilities that we have lost or never developed. The ability to operate effectively with minimal technology, to make split-second decisions under impossible pressure, to accept personal risk for others without hesitation. These are valuable traits in a Coalition partner. The Krell observer added his own assessment. Your species also brings humility regarding your technological level, while maintaining confidence in your abilities. You did not claim your helicopters were superior to our craft. You simply stated you could fly them in conditions where we could not. That is an important distinction. A medical alert chimed softly, and the Vaxian physician made a shooing gesture with his tendrils. Enough politics. My patient needs rest. You may continue these discussions when Commander Chen has recovered fully. The officials began filing out, but Coordinator Vren lingered. Commander, my daughter wishes to thank you personally when you are well. She told the medical staff that the human who rescued her smelled like courage. High praise from a Xynthian child, whose species can detect emotional states through pheromones. After they left, Sarah lay back, processing everything. The mission had succeeded beyond her hopes. Not just the rescue, but what it represented for human-alien relations. They had proven that humanity belonged among the stars, that their methods and mindset had value even in a universe of advanced technology. The physician returned with a small device. This is a communicator. Your crew has been asking about you repeatedly. Shall I allow them to visit briefly? Please. Minutes later, Rodriguez, Takahashi, Morrison, and both crew chiefs crowded into the medical room, their faces showing relief mixed with exhaustion. Rodriguez spoke first, his gruff voice unable to hide his concern. How you feeling, Commander? Like I swallowed a bucket of acid, but I'll live. How are the birds? Rodriguez's expression turned professional. Bird 2 has rotor damage that'll take a few days to repair. Bird 3's hydraulic system needs a complete rebuild. And Bird 1, he paused, a slight smile crossing his face. Bird 1 needs a new engine, new transmission, structural reinforcement on the tail section, and about 100 hours of maintenance. But she got you home. They all did, Sarah said, looking at each member of her crew. You all performed flawlessly today. I couldn't have asked for better people beside me. Takahashi bowed slightly, her Japanese heritage showing through. It was an honor to fly this mission with you, Commander. Though I must admit, that landing you made while rescuing the child was absolutely insane. In a good way. Morrison grinned, his youthful enthusiasm undimmed despite the harrowing day. The Vaxians have been going over our flight recorder data like it's some kind of magic trick. They keep asking how we compensated for the wind patterns without computer assistance. I don't think they understand that we just feel it. They're learning, Sarah replied. That's what today was really about. Teaching them that sometimes the old ways, the hard ways, are still the best ways for certain situations. The crew lingered for a while, sharing stories from the mission, decompressing from the adrenaline and stress. Eventually, the physician returned and firmly insisted they leave to let Sarah rest. As they filed out, Rodriguez paused at the door. Commander, there's something you should know. Word about the mission spread fast. We've got requests from a dozen other species wanting to learn about helicopter operations. 3 weeks had passed since the Colony 7 rescue. Sarah stood in the main assembly hall of the Coalition flagship, her dress uniform crisp and decorated with new commendations that felt heavier than their physical weight suggested. Behind her stood Takahashi, Morrison, Rodriguez, and the two crew chiefs, Mallory and Sergeant Kim, who had flown with Morrison. All wore their best uniforms, though Sarah could see Rodriguez tugging at his collar uncomfortably. The hall was filled with representatives from across the coalition. Vaxians, Xinthians, Kaltorians, Krell, and dozens of other species Sarah was still learning to identify. Floating holocameras recorded everything, broadcasting the ceremony across coalition space. This was more than a simple award presentation. This was a statement. Admiral Throck stood at the central podium, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the hall's lights. Today we gather to honor those who demonstrated the highest virtues of the coalition. When faced with a crisis that our combined technology deemed unsolvable, these humans provided a solution that was elegant in its simplicity and extraordinary in its execution. The holographic display behind him showed footage from the rescue mission. Sarah watched herself landing the Black Hawk on that tiny rooftop, the helicopter rocking in the violent winds. She barely recognized her own flying in those recordings. It looked impossibly reckless from the outside. Yet she remembered each moment as calculated and controlled. Commander Sarah Chen, Colonel Yuki Takahashi, Lieutenant James Morrison, Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, Sergeant David Mallory, and Sergeant Jennifer Kim. Please step forward. They moved as one unit, their military training evident in their synchronized precision. The assembled representatives stirred, their various forms of attention focused entirely on the human contingent. Throck continued, his translator rendering his words with appropriate gravitas. You are hereby awarded the Coalition Star of Valor, the highest honor our alliance can bestow. Your actions saved 300 lives and demonstrated qualities that embody the finest aspects of sentient courage and capability. Smaller figures emerged from the crowd, each carrying a crystalline star that seemed to capture and refract light in impossible ways. The medals were attached to ribbons woven from materials Sarah couldn't identify, shimmering with colors that shifted as they moved. As each medal was placed around their necks, Sarah felt the weight of not just the physical object but of expectation and responsibility. But Throck wasn't finished. In addition to these individual honors, the Coalition Council has voted unanimously to grant Earth full membership status, effective immediately. Humanity has proven that it brings unique and valuable capabilities to our alliance. Welcome as equals to the coalition of sovereign worlds. The hall erupted in sounds of approval that varied wildly by species. Chirps, bellows, harmonic vibrations, and what might have been polite applause from the few other species with hands. Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she fought to keep off her face. Full membership. Everything humanity had worked toward for decades, achieved because they'd proven their worth in the most fundamental way possible. After the formal ceremony concluded, the hall transformed into a more casual gathering. Sarah found herself surrounded by curious aliens asking questions about helicopter operations, human flight training, and the decision-making process during high-risk missions. She answered as best she could, trying to explain concepts that felt intuitive to her but were clearly foreign to species who had never needed to develop such skills. Coordinator Vren approached with his daughter, the young Xinthian Sarah had rescued. The child held her father's hand tightly but looked at Sarah with open curiosity and something that might have been hero worship. Commander Chen, my daughter wished to give you something. Vren spoke gently, encouraging the child forward. The little girl held out a small sculpture, carved from some kind of blue-green stone. It depicted a stylized helicopter with a figure visible in the cockpit. The craftsmanship was remarkable, especially considering it had been made by someone so young. I made it myself, the child said through her translator, her voice soft. So you remember that courage smells like home. Sarah knelt down, accepting the gift with hands that weren't quite steady. It's beautiful. Thank you. I'll treasure it always. The child suddenly wrapped her arms around Sarah's neck in what was unmistakably a hug, regardless of species. Sarah returned the embrace carefully, aware of the differences in their physiologies but understanding that some gestures were truly universal. As Vren gently retrieved his daughter, he met Sarah's eyes. She has been drawing pictures of helicopters constantly since the rescue. She tells everyone that when she grows up, she wants to learn to fly like the humans do. You have inspired a generation, Commander, not just of my people, but of many species represented here today. Later, as the gathering began to wind down, Sarah found herself on an observation deck overlooking the fleet of coalition vessels. The view was spectacular. Dozens of ships representing the technological achievements of advanced civilizations. Yet somewhere in those ships were 3 battered Blackhawks, primitive by comparison but proven in ways that mattered. Admiral Throck joined her at the viewport, his presence announced by the soft clicking of his ceremonial armor. They stood in silence for a moment, 2 very different beings contemplating the same starfield. "I have been reviewing your species' history," Throck said eventually. "You developed powered flight only 200 years ago. In that brief span, you progressed from fragile wooden frames to spacecraft capable of crossing your solar system. And throughout that development, you maintained the tradition of manual flight, of pilot skill over automation. We learned early that over-reliance on automation could be dangerous," Sarah replied. "There were incidents where pilots forgot how to fly their machines manually, and when the computers failed, disaster followed. So we kept teaching the fundamentals, kept requiring pilots to be able to fly without assistance. A choice that most species would consider inefficient. Why train extensively for skills that machines can perform better?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Because machines break. Systems fail. Technology has limits. But a skilled person, someone who truly understands their craft, can adapt to circumstances that no computer could anticipate. Today proved that." Throck's tendrils curled in a pattern Sarah had learned meant thoughtful agreement. "Indeed. The Coalition has become perhaps too comfortable with our technology. We design our machines to be infallible, our systems to handle every contingency. But in doing so, we may have lost something valuable, the ability to operate beyond our technology's limits." "You haven't lost it," Sarah corrected gently. "You just need to remember it. Every species had to start somewhere, had to develop skills before developing tools. Those foundations are still there." An optimistic perspective. Very human. Throck turned to face her fully. "Commander, the Coalition Council has another request. We wish to establish a joint training program. Human pilots would teach our pilots manual flight operations, including helicopter operations. In exchange, we would provide instruction in our advanced technologies. A mutual exchange of knowledge and capability." Sarah felt excitement building despite her exhaustion. That's exactly the kind of cooperation that full membership should enable. "I'd be honored to help develop such a program." "Excellent. Though I must warn you, many of our pilots will find the experience humbling. They are accustomed to machines that compensate for their errors. Your helicopters, as you demonstrated, do not forgive mistakes. That's what makes them excellent teachers," Sarah replied. "Nothing teaches you to be a better pilot faster than flying a machine that demands your full attention and skill." The Krell observer approached, his movements more respectful than during their first meeting. "Commander Chen, I find myself curious about something. During the rescue, you were offered the opportunity to use safer methods, to wait for better conditions, to minimize risk. Yet you consistently chose the more dangerous option when lives were at stake. Is this philosophy common among humans?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I can't speak for all humans. We're as diverse as any species. But I think there's something in our history that shaped us. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us at every turn. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, hostile climates. We survived because we learned to take calculated risks, to act decisively when action was needed, and to protect our own, even when it was dangerous to do so. A death world species," the Krell murmured. "We use that term, but I do not think we truly understood its implications until now. You are not simply tough or resilient. You are fundamentally shaped by risk and danger in ways that we are not." "Maybe," Sarah acknowledged, "but I think every species has strengths that come from their origins. You bring different capabilities, different perspectives. That diversity is what makes the Coalition strong." The Krell's translator rendered a sound that might have been appreciative laughter. "Diplomatic as well as brave. You will do well as a full member of the Coalition, Commander Chen." As the conversation continued, Sarah noticed Rodriguez approaching with Takahashi and Morrison. Her crew chief's expression suggested he had news. "Commander, the repair crews just finished their assessment.